Just a fair warning before the video begins. This video will not be spoiler free. I'll be going over my thoughts of this book, including spoilers. So, I've now finished reading Exit Strategy, which is the fourth book in the Murderbot Diaries. I just want to say that straight up this has been my favourite entry into the series so far. Really, this book feels like the culmination of an overarching arc for Murderbot, and everything comes together into a head, and it really feels like a conclusion of sorts. So we left Murderbot at the end of the last book, Rogue Protocol, when they decided to return to Preservation and reunite Mensa and the rest of her crew from All Systems Red in order to deliver the incriminating Grey Chris data that they retrieved from the abandoned terraforming facility. Murderbot discovers that Mensa has in fact been kidnapped by Grey Chris and takes a snap decision to go save her. This video should be a bit shorter than the others. I've got a bit less to say, and overall this is a good thing because I have a lot less to say about the books regarding things I didn't like. In fact, I'm not even sure if I'm going to put in a don't like section in this book because I feel like I'd just be nitpicking. The things that I did like are mostly the same as the previous books, continuing, thankfully, into the next entry. So, as usual, I'll go on to the things that I liked about these books, and if I do think of anything negative I want to say, I'll stick it in at the end, but I don't currently have any plans to do so. From the end of All Systems Red, Murderbot has been going through an arc of self-discovery, a story of a battle between how it sees itself and what it wants to do with its life. In the first book, we see that Murderbot develops meaningful connections to those around it, that is to say the PreservationAux crew, specifically Mensa, and then it rejects those connections at the end because it feels like it doesn't want to be owned by anyone. Murderbot wants its freedom and also wants, though it's not very good at realising it, to connect with others meaningfully. These two desires come into conflict, so Murderbot leaves to go on a journey of self-discovery. This journey really culminates in this book, and through the events of this book, by the end, Murderbot is in a situation where there is the possibility that if it tries and puts in effort, it could be treated as an equal within the preservation systems, whilst also being able to live with or near the humans it has come to care for. This book also ties everything together perfectly with all the events of the previous books cropping up and being relevant to the plot of this book in a really satisfying ways, which really elevated the storytelling quality to far beyond the previous books. Murderbot wants to live with Mensa and the other humans, but as an equal, not as an object. And though this isn't immediately possible, without pretending to be a human anyway, Murderbot is given a clear path to achieving this goal and sets itself upon the path to realising it. Overall, this is an extremely satisfying conclusion from a narrative perspective, but also from the perspective of Murderbot's personal journey. By the end of this book, it knows what it wants, and it has a clear goal. So really, this book felt like the culmination of a story arc of sorts. That being the first 4 books kind of felt like an arc that has concluded with this book. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Murderbot goes on to kind of be part of this crew and basically make a home and a place for itself in the world. I'm looking forward to seeing the end of Murderbot's kind of transience and its struggle with its self-image and what it wants. And also, I'm looking forward to Murderbot kind of start to deal with their trauma, which has been a main theme of these books, which I'll bring up later. Murderbot hasn't really dealt with its trauma in any meaningful way. In fact, it's just kind of been affected by its trauma consistently throughout the books. But I'll go into more details of this later, but this book really felt like the beginning of Murderbot maybe starting to deal with its trauma a little bit. Anyway, now I'll go on to the next section, but yeah, the culmination of the story arc in this book was really satisfying and was a massive strength of this book. Next, I want to talk about the reintroduction of the PreservationAux crew. This is something I really liked about this book. And although I did not think that these characters are particularly strong characters in their own, they do add to the books by feeding into Murderbot's development and their characterization, and they really feel like the missing piece of these stories after having read this book. Murderbot has some really heartfelt scenes in these books with the rest of the crew after being reunited with them, and the crew reacts with a realistic breadth of interactions after Murderbot's return. There's anger, a genuine interest in what Murderbot's been up to, there's joy, and this was delivered really well and makes these side characters come across as if they have the illusion of depth through their interaction with Murderbot. And that's fine, that's all they need to be, because as I said, In the previous videos, these books are all about Murderbot anyway, so the other characters definitely exist to inform Murderbot's development and establishment as a character. In this regard, the characters are great in this book, and this is a massive upgrade from the previous books, where I felt like the side characters to be a massively frustrating weak point of the books. In Exit Strategy though, this feels like a warm and heartfelt reunion with old friends, and that was a massive positive. I look forward to the books having a consistent cast of side characters that can be developed alongside Murderbot from now on in the books. That's something that I really personally find important in the enjoyment of a series, and hopefully now that Murderbot has been reunited with these characters, this can be realised and we can see this happen throughout the series of books from this point on. Throughout the books, one of the primary themes has been the effects of trauma. This does tie into my first point about the culmination of the arc so far, as it directly relates to Murderbot's trauma and their relationship with it. Obviously, Murderbot is deeply fucking traumatized by the massacre it's forced to take part in before the beginning of the first book, along with the other awful things it's forced to experience by humans. Murderbot deals with this by using a lot of coping mechanisms. The first and most obvious is that it tricks itself into viewing itself as an object and not a person. It rationalizes the way it was treated to make it more emotionally palatable, so to speak. The other is that Murderbot continues to put itself through a repetition of its previously traumatic experiences. Of course, you would think that when a person was forced to do a certain traumatic thing and suddenly had their freedom, the last thing they would do with that freedom is then to go on to put themselves through similar experiences, right? Well, no, because the tendency to repeat traumatic events or circumstances similar to the original traumatic event is actually a very common effect of trauma that hardly anyone ever talks about, and in my opinion is one of the best things about these books, and its presentation of it is the biggest tell that Murderbot is deeply fucking traumatized. Sure, it has a lot of other behaviours like staring at walls, anxiety, social awkwardness, but these could easily be explained by other means. A lot of people are socially awkward and anxious, and they aren't necessarily traumatized. Murderbot is repeatedly putting itself into life and death circumstances to protect humans. Yeah, that's trauma, raw and untreated. The realistic presentation of what it looks like to be traumatized was always one of the best parts of these books, but this really comes to a head for me in this book, Exit Strategy. Obviously, you never really get over trauma. It lives with you always. You can learn to deal with it more effectively and live a healthy and fulfilling life despite your trauma. And Murderbot is far away from this point. It is still deeply scarred by its traumatic past, and it shows no sign of stopping anytime soon. But this book represents a first step on the journey of actually dealing with it. See, the thing about trauma is it's basically impossible to deal with alone. Some people are capable of the levels of self-awareness and introspection required for growing past the wounds left by traumatic experiences, but I think we can all agree that Murderbot is not that. It barely understands its own basic emotions. As Murderbot likes to say, I was having an emotion. Does that sound like a well-adjusted person to you? Obviously not. That's why this book stood out to me so much in relation to this point. In this book, Murderbot takes the first step to begin the healing process, and that is to accept others as being part of their life. This is such a massive first step in any healing process for any mental health issue. It's difficult to deal with it by yourself, and most people need help. Obviously, in our case in the real world, we would probably just go to therapy, but I don't see that happening here. So the closest thing Murderbot is ever going to get is the caring attention and direction lended to it by its new companions, the members of PreservationAux, and its new mother figure, Mensa. I didn't want to bring up the main theme of trauma in one of these videos, mainly because when I was done with the series I wanted to make a video about this theme and its presentation of trauma throughout the series as a whole. Thing is, I just thought it was so well done in this book. But not just in this book, the series as a whole, and it has really stuck out to me as the most meaningful part of Murderbot's journey, and was a major component of my enjoyment in this book. I thought we rarely got to see just how far Murderbot is willing to go to put itself into dangerous situations that it doesn't need to be in, just to relive its trauma. And this is obviously a symptom of its trauma. This is a symptom of the fact that Murderbot hasn't learned to deal with its trauma healthily. And this really kind of is shown at the end of the book when Murderbot specifically goes out of its way to continue to fight in a battle that it knows it can't win. And it only leaves when it knows it's going to die and that there are no other options. The reality is that Murderbot was outnumbered and could have been killed very easily, and it was hardly wise to continue to fight when it could have waited to escape. And this kind of theme and this recurrence of behaviour of Murderbot, reliving its trauma, putting itself back into situations that originally traumatized it, was really, really well shown in this book, I thought, compared to the others. Although it is obvious in the other, not obvious, but it is there in the other books. This book kind of showed that element of trauma better than the rest of the books, so it really stuck out to me. This one's going to be a bit of a short point. The action scenes and climax, it slapped. Murderbot was being a big old badass again, who could have guessed. Murderbot versus the Sec Units was by far one of the best action scenes in the series of books so far. I just thought it deserved its own quick little shout out as one of the best things. The action has massively improved from the first book, in my opinion, of course. I thought that the action in the first one sucked pretty badly, and compared to this book, it shows a massive change in the series and a massive improvement. Also found that the climax of this book to be the best climax of the series so far, closely followed by the conclusion of Rogue Protocol. I thought that the action sequence leading up to the boarding of the shuttle was awesome, the short interaction with the company reps, and Murderbot overextending itself to take over the ship was, quite frankly, really fucking cool in a very cinematic way. The Murderbot having to put itself together and restore itself after overextending itself was probably the best that Martha's prose has been in these books, and really impressed me. This is quite an abstract experience to describe and explain, and I felt like Martha did a very good job of portraying it and making it very palatable and basically making it easy for us to empathise with what it would be like to go through that experience. And this is not an easy thing to do, so that was very impressive, I thought. Overall, I just want to say that at the end of this point that I think that these books have massively improved. I think that this book is a very strong book for a lot of reasons, all the reasons that I previously mentioned. And this point kind of exemplifies the improvements that I think Martha Wells has been going through on her journey of writing these books, and it really shows. I think that no matter how much of an experienced author you are, obviously Martha Wells is an experienced author, these are far from her first books, but there's always kind of a period where you start writing a new character or a new story where you've really got to kind of get in the saddle, you've got to slowly get into the mind of the character. I think Martha has shown in this book that she really has perfected Murderbot as a character and her understanding of Murderbot and what she wants to do with Murderbot and how she wants to present Murderbot to us and the themes and ideas she wants to explore through Murderbot. In conclusion, I just want to say that the subsequent novels, I'm sure, will cover a new chapter of Murderbot's life, and I'm interested to see it happen. I really want to see what Murderbot does next, and I've said that basically at the end of all these videos, but considering that these books are all about Murderbot and Murderbot's development and their journey, there's pretty much no bigger compliment you can give these books other than that they keep you interested in Murderbot and what Murderbot's going to do next, because that's the core of these books and that's what's going to keep you reading. And for me, Murderbot is turning out to be one of my favourite fictional characters, really. I really like Murderbot. They're a very unique character, and I can't wait to see how these stories are going to change and evolve without the restriction of being short novellas. So overall, I feel like, I'm not sure, to be fair, I don't have any evidence of this, but it seems to me like the first 4 books are supposed to be their own thing and it ends there. And then Martha Wells was like, fuck it, I'm going to keep writing Murderbot stories. Because this really felt like the end of an arc, the end of the story, with a little possibility of it continuing. Obviously, I know that it does continue because Network Effect and Systems Collapse and Fugitive Telemetry are already out by the time I am reading these books. And I'm really glad that she did continue because I really feel like there's so much more of Murderbot's story to tell, and I'm really looking forward to it. Ultimately, I want to see Murderbot learn to live a happy life. I want to see Murderbot be able to find a way to deal with its trauma, and I want to see Murderbot be happy. And if not happy, at least be content. Because I really, really, really have a lot of empathy for this character. And I think that concludes my video about this book. I don't rate books on a 1 to 10 or a 5-star scale because I just think it's massively reductive. I've really, 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 really enjoyed this journey with Murderbot, and although these aren't ever going to be my favourite series of books just because they lack too many of the things that draw me into a really strong work of fiction, like a big cast of characters that I really get invested in, The reality is that these books have massively improved from the first, and have consistently delivered on their promise of a character-driven story that is satisfying. I don't know what else I could say about a series of books that could be more positive than that, really. And I think that's where I'm going to conclude this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video or listen to it. If you did, I really appreciate it. These videos are a bit rambly, and I know that they're not exactly very professionally produced, but that's fine, that's just not my style. I don't script these videos, I just talk and I record it. I'm sure that comes across in the video. Thank you very much, and if you did like this video, please like it or whatever. And thank you, Martha Wells, for writing these books. They've been a pleasure. Anyway, adios, goodbye, and thank you for watching.